You know the feeling. We've all been there, right? Standing on a street corner, checking your phone again, sending that classic "where are you" text. You're waiting for that one friend, or maybe it's a family member, who just seems to operate in their own personal time zone. It's honestly one of the most common and, let's face it, frustrating social situations there is. So it begs the question, why? Why are some people always late? It's a question that can seriously strain friendships, cause all sorts of tension at work, and we tend to jump to the same conclusions. They must be disrespectful or disorganized, or maybe they just don't value our time. But what if all of that is completely wrong? In this explainer, we're going to put those judgments aside for a minute and actually look at what cognitive science has to say. Because the evidence suggests that for a lot of chronically late people, the problem isn't a lack of consideration at all. Nope. The real reason is hiding deep inside the very architecture of their brain. Okay, let's dive right in. To really get to the bottom of lateness, we first have to understand a little bit about how our brains plan for the future. You can think of it like learning about your brain's own internal operating system. Now, the command center for this whole system is something psychologists call executive function. Just think of it as the CEO of your brain. Seriously, it's the part that's in charge of planning, setting priorities, managing your attention, controlling your impulses. It's what allows you to see a future goal, like say being at a meeting at 10 a.m., and then work backward to figure out all the little steps you need to take to get there on time. And this inner CEO, or executive function, it basically has two very different modes for thinking about things. And understanding the difference between these two modes, well, that's the first major key to unlocking this whole puzzle of lateness. So it really boils down to this. First, you've got low-level thinking. This is all about the present moment. It's the how. How do I write this email? How do I make this cup of coffee? It's concrete, it's immediate, it's what's right in front of you. Then you have high-level thinking. This is about the future. It's the why. Why is this meeting important? What happens if I'm late? It's abstract. Now, for people who really struggle with being on time, their brain might just be wired to favor that low-level, in-the-moment thinking, which makes future stuff feel way less real and urgent. And this quote just hits the nail on the head. For some, the future is an abstract concept, not a concrete destination. I mean, think about that. If that 10 a.m. meeting feels more like a vague idea than a solid, real event on your calendar, your brain isn't going to have that same sense of urgency to get ready. The concrete task right in front of you, like finishing one last email, will always feel more real and more important. So, okay, how does this actually play out in the real world as you're trying to get out the door? Well, it's not just about how we see the future, it's also about the sheer difficulty of transitioning into that future. And this brings us to that very familiar problem of just one more thing. Oh, we have all lived this moment. You're about to leave, but then you think, I'll just quickly send this one email. Then, oh, you know what? I should probably grab a snack. Then your phone buzzes and you have to reply to that text. Now, by themselves, each of these things takes what, a minute? But the real time thief here isn't the tasks themselves. It's the invisible time and mental energy it costs to switch between them. And here's the crucial point. Our brains have a built-in cognitive bias. We are consistently, systematically bad at guessing how long these little transitions will actually take. We think switching from work mode to find my keys mode to leave the house mode should be instant, but it's not. There's a hidden time cost for every single one of those gear shifts. And there's a scientific name for this skill, of course. It's called cognitive flexibility. It's a huge part of that executive function we were just talking about. The best way to think of it is like the clutch in your brain's engine. It's what lets you smoothly disengage from one task and then engage with the next. For some people, that clutch is just a little stickier, making every transition take a bit more time and a bit more effort than they planned for. This simple chart really shows the problem in a nutshell. We think the time for all those one last thing transitions is this tiny little bar on the left. But in reality, when you add up all that friction, all that clutch work between tasks, it's actually this much larger bar on the right. This gap right here between our perception and reality, that's where punctuality completely breaks down. So when you put all of this together, the brain that's focused on the present, the future feeling kind of abstract, and this constant underestimation of transition time, you can start to build a completely new framework for understanding what's really going on. And let's be absolutely clear about this. This new framework moves us completely away from judgment. It stops being about whether someone is good or bad with time, and it starts being about someone just having a different cognitive style for processing it. So what have we learned? Let's recap. First, chronic lateness is very often tied to our brain's executive function, not to a person's character. Second, some brains are just wired to prioritize the concrete stuff happening right now over the abstract future. Third, this skill called cognitive flexibility is a huge factor in how easily we can switch gears. And finally, almost all of us underestimate this transition time, but for some people, that miscalculation is a much bigger and more chronic issue. So the big takeaway here is really a fundamental shift in perspective. We're moving the whole conversation away from the idea of a moral failing. They just don't care, and toward a neurological reality. It's a cognitive difference in how a brain perceives and interacts with time itself. And that leaves us with one last question to really think about. Whether you're the person who's always waiting or you're the one who's always late, knowing all this, how might it change your approach? How could it change your conversations, your planning, or maybe even just your frustration? It's a really powerful idea to consider. Thanks so much for tuning in.